Discover the remarkable journey of Joseph, a young dreamer blessed with a unique gift and a colorful coat that set him apart. Witness his rise from being sold into slavery by his own brothers to becoming a powerful leader in Egypt. This story of faith, forgiveness, and divine providence is filled with lessons that resonate even today. Join us in this compelling narration of Joseph's trials, dreams, and ultimate triumph. Joseph, the son of Jacob and Rachel, was loved dearly by his father. As a token of his affection, Jacob gifted Joseph a coat of many colors, a symbol of favor and distinction. However, this coat in Joseph's dreams stirred jealousy among his brothers, leading them to plot against him. This is the story of Joseph, a story of faith, betrayal, and redemption that shows how God can turn adversity into triumph. Let's dive into this inspiring journey, filled with dreams, challenges, and ultimate victory. Joseph's early life and the coat of many colors, Part 1, Joseph, the favored son. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob, born to him in his old age by his beloved wife, Rachel. From a young age, Joseph stood out among his brothers. Jacob loved him more than any of his other sons and made him a richly ornamented robe, known as the coat of many colors. This special coat was not just a garment, it was a symbol of Jacob's deep affection for Joseph and his chosen status among the brothers. However, it also stirred up feelings of envy and resentment in the hearts of his 10 older brothers, who saw this as favoritism. To make matters worse, Joseph began having dreams that hinted at his future greatness, dreams where his brothers' sheaves of grain bowed down to his, and even the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed to him. These dreams only fueled his brothers' jealousy. Part 2, the plot against Joseph. The brothers' jealousy reached a boiling point. One day, when Joseph was sent by Jacob to check on his brothers as they tended to their flocks, the brothers saw an opportunity to rid themselves of the dreamer. They plotted to kill him and throw him into a pit. Reuben, the eldest brother, intervened, suggesting they throw Joseph into an empty cistern instead, intending to rescue him later. But while Reuben was away, the other brothers sold Joseph to a caravan of Ishmaelite traders heading to Egypt for 20 pieces of silver. To cover up their deed, they dipped Joseph's beautiful coat in goat's blood and presented it to their father, Jacob, who mourned for his son, believing he had been devoured by a wild beast. Part 3, Joseph in Potiphar's home in Egypt. Joseph was sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Despite his circumstances, Joseph remained faithful to God, and God blessed him. Soon, Joseph gained favor in Potiphar's eyes and was put in charge of his household. Everything Joseph touched prospered, and Potiphar's estate flourished under his management. But trouble was brewing. Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph's good looks and tried to seduce him. Joseph, loyal to his master and to God, refused her advances. Enraged by his rejection, she falsely accused him of attacking her, and Potiphar had Joseph thrown into prison. Part 4, Joseph in prison. Even in prison, God was with Joseph. He gained the trust of the prison warden, who put him in charge of all the prisoners. It wasn't long before 2 of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, were thrown into the same prison. Both officials had troubling dreams, and God granted Joseph the ability to interpret them. He interpreted that the cupbearer would be restored to his position, while the baker would be executed. 3 days later, Joseph's interpretations proved true. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him and mention him to Pharaoh, but when the cupbearer was restored to his position, he forgot all about Joseph, leaving him in prison for 2 more years. Part 5, Pharaoh's dreams. One night, Pharaoh had 2 disturbing dreams that none of his wise men could interpret. The cupbearer then remembered Joseph and his ability to interpret dreams and told Pharaoh about him. Joseph was brought from the dungeon, cleaned up, and presented before Pharaoh. With God's wisdom, Joseph interpreted the dreams to mean that there would be 7 years of abundance in Egypt followed by 7 years of severe famine. Joseph advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee the land and store surplus grain during the plentiful years to prepare for the famine. Impressed, Pharaoh decided that Joseph himself was the man for the job. Part 6, Joseph's rise to power. Pharaoh appointed Joseph as the second in command over Egypt, giving him authority over the entire land. Joseph was given a signet ring, fine linen clothes, and a gold chain around his neck. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, gathering and storing vast amounts of grain in the cities. The land produced plentifully under his management, and Egypt was prepared for the upcoming famine. As Joseph managed the land, he was blessed with 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, whose names reflected his journey of overcoming hardship and seeing God's favor in a foreign land. Part 7. Joseph's brothers come to Egypt. The famine spread across all lands, and only Egypt had grain stored, thanks to Joseph's foresight. Jacob, hearing there was grain in Egypt, sent his 10 sons, except for the youngest, Benjamin, to buy grain. As they arrived, they were brought before Joseph, who was now the governor of Egypt, but they did not recognize him. Joseph immediately recognized his brothers but pretended to be a stranger. He spoke harshly to them and accused them of being spies. The brothers, terrified, denied the accusation, explaining they were honest men, all sons of one man in Canaan, and mentioned their youngest brother, Benjamin. Seizing this opportunity, Joseph tested them. He demanded that one brother remain in Egypt while the rest returned with Benjamin to prove their honesty. Simeon was bound before their eyes, and the rest were sent back with grain, their money secretly returned in their sacks. Part 8. Joseph tests his brothers upon returning to Canaan. The brothers told their father, Jacob, about the demand to bring Benjamin to Egypt. Fearful for Benjamin's safety, Jacob initially refused, but the severe famine forced him to relent. Judah pledged to take full responsibility for Benjamin's return. The brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin and stood before Joseph again. Overwhelmed with emotion, Joseph secretly arranged a feast for them, marveling at the sight of his younger brother. He tested them further by seating them in order of their birth and giving Benjamin 5 times more food. Joseph instructed his steward to fill their sacks with grain and to secretly place his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. The next morning, as they departed, the steward pursued them and accused them of stealing the cup. The brothers, horrified, declared their innocence and offered to be slaves if the cup was found. Part 9. The silver cup incident. The steward searched their sacks, beginning with the eldest and ending with Benjamin. When the cup was discovered in Benjamin's sack, the brothers tore their clothes in despair and returned to the city. They threw themselves before Joseph, pleading for mercy. Joseph declared that only Benjamin would stay as his slave while the others could return home. However, the brothers, led by Judah, refused to abandon Benjamin, explaining how their father Jacob would die of grief if Benjamin did not return. Moved by Judah's heartfelt plea, Joseph could no longer contain his emotions. He ordered everyone except his brothers to leave the room and then revealed his true identity. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt," he said, his voice breaking. Part 10. Judah's plea and Joseph's revelation. Shocked and terrified, the brothers could not believe their eyes. Joseph, however, reassured them, saying, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." He explained how the famine would continue for 5 more years and how God had orchestrated all of this to save them and their families. He told them to return quickly to Canaan, bring their father, Jacob, and their families to Egypt, where he would provide for them. Overwhelmed with joy and relief, the brothers embraced Joseph. Joseph wept upon each of them, especially Benjamin. Pharaoh, upon hearing of Joseph's family, invited them all to come and settle in the best part of Egypt, the land of Goshen. Part 11. Reunion with Jacob. When the brothers returned to Canaan and told Jacob that Joseph was alive and a ruler in Egypt, his heart fainted, he could not believe it. But when he saw the wagons Joseph had sent to carry him, his spirit revived, and he exclaimed, "It is enough, Joseph my son is still alive. I will go and see him before I die, Obi." The whole family set out for Egypt. When Jacob saw Joseph, he embraced him and wept for a long time. "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive," Jacob said, filled with gratitude. Joseph introduced his father and brothers to Pharaoh, who welcomed them warmly and gave them the land of Goshen to settle in. Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and the family began their new life in Egypt, prospering under Joseph's care. Part 12. Jacob blesses his sons. As the years passed, Jacob neared the end of his life. He called for his sons to gather around him so he could bless each one and prophesy about their futures. To Joseph, he gave a double portion of inheritance and a special blessing over his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob placed his right hand on Ephraim, the younger, and his left on Manasseh, the elder, intentionally crossing his hands. When Joseph tried to correct him, Jacob insisted, saying that Ephraim would become greater than Manasseh. After blessing all his sons, Jacob instructed them to bury him in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and Leah were buried. He then drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Part 13. The severe famine continued throughout the region. Because of Joseph's wisdom and planning, Egypt remained a center of provision. People from all lands came to buy grain, and soon Joseph had collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan, bringing it into Pharaoh's house. As the famine worsened, Joseph introduced a barter system where people exchanged their livestock for food. When the livestock ran out, Joseph allowed them to sell their land and themselves into servitude to Pharaoh, effectively centralizing all power and resources in Pharaoh's hands. Despite the harsh conditions, Joseph ensured the survival of the people by instituting a law where they kept 4/5 of their produce and gave 1/5 to Pharaoh. His wisdom not only saved Egypt but also transformed its economy and government. Part 14. Joseph's forgiveness and the fulfillment of dreams. After Jacob's death, Joseph's brothers feared he would seek revenge for their past wrongs. They sent a message to Joseph, begging for his forgiveness, reminding him of their father's wishes. Joseph wept when he received their message. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him, saying, "We are your slaves." But Joseph replied, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." With these words, Joseph reassured them and spoke kindly to them, promising to provide for them and their children. Thus, Joseph's dreams were fulfilled, not in a spirit of dominance, but in a spirit of forgiveness and divine purpose, showing that God's plans always prevail. The story of Joseph is a profound tale of forgiveness, divine providence, and faithfulness amidst adversity. From a pit to a palace, Joseph's journey teaches us that no matter how dire our circumstances may seem, there is always a greater plan at work. May this story inspire you to trust in God's wisdom and love, even in your darkest hours. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Joseph's incredible life. If you were moved by his story of perseverance and faith, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Remember, God's plans are always greater than our own. Stay blessed. Thank you for watching.